After 2 seasons watching their biggest rival take center stage, lifting trophies while Real Madrid dealt with many internal problems and few results on the field, Real Madrid went shopping for the upcoming season. But after a few years with the calm and winning leadership of Carlo Ancelotti, Real Madrid decided to shake things up in management and chose none other than Jose Mourinho as their coach for the next season. And one of the main aspects we'll see Mourinho address in his return to Real Madrid is exactly this right here. Look, back at Real, Mourinho takes a stricter approach and imposes rules on the squad. Keep this in mind because in Real Madrid's equation, this management issue is very important. Shall we go back in time? At the beginning of last season, Real Madrid hired Xabi Alonso to be the team's coach, and it didn't last long. In January 2026, he was fired. And among the various reasons why the club decided to fire Xabi Alonso were these: locker room problems, tactical indecision, and the defeats, obviously. Understand a bit about his downfall. I'm going to go deeper into a more specific topic here, which was exactly the poor locker room management. According to this investigation here, the players found Xabi Alonso's interventions in the daily management of the Real Madrid squad strange, even more so since he's a former player of the club. He was used to that day-to-day environment there, full of stars and all that. Among the things Xabi Alonso did, he introduced several disciplinary measures and conduct rules in a squad that's full of stars and everything else. So this management issue is very significant. It's always sensitive in this kind of scenario, right? An example was the ban on cell phones at various times, right? At dinner, for example, or during camp. The players weren't allowed to be on their phones. And another aspect that also weighed heavily on the atmosphere not being so good with Xabi Alonso was a rule that required the players to return with the club's delegation on the same day that away games took place. Before, the players would go play in other places in Spain, in Valencia, in Bilbao, in Barcelona, and they would play and use the rest of the day to visit relatives, friends, or just go out. Then the next day they would return. This change also caused a bit of discord, let's say, in the relationship between Xabi Alonso and the Real Madrid players. So when we look at these two things, it's at least strange to think that Real Madrid is bringing in a coach to be strict and to have this strong and more rigid management style. One of the main issues with his work is that in the previous job, the coach who tried to address these issues failed because of a lack of compatibility with the players. But a lot happened between those two periods. Finally, at the very end of last season, sidelined by injury, Mbappe traveled with his girlfriend and upset the Real Madrid squad. This was a chapter that happened at the end of last season. Mbappe was injured at the very end of the 25-26 football cycle. And then, injured, he decided to take a few days off with his girlfriend and travel around Europe. This news is from May 4th. A few days later, on the 4th, a fight between Valverde and Tucho Amine at Real Madrid became international news. Scandal. They got into a brawl in the locker room, to put it plainly. Tucho Amini and Valverde. Valverde even had a cut on his head, had to go to the hospital and everything. Anyway, yeah, that was another chapter in Real Madrid's management crisis last season. Here are some newspaper covers from around the world, including a German one, highlighting this issue. Another outlet, El País, also reports on Real Madrid's crisis. The locker room issues, previous Mbappe problems, and conflicts between Valverde and Tucho Amini. There was also trouble with Rudiger, Carreras and Carvajal, who eventually left Real Madrid. So, the locker room was boiling last season. One news piece from the 4th, one from the 8th. This one is from May 14th. So, in 10 days, a lot of management problems happened at Real Madrid. Mbappe and Arbeloa exchanged barbs after Real Madrid's win in the league. Arbeloa was selected as Real Madrid's coach for the season's final stretch. Mbappe said at a certain point, right, in the mixed zone after that game that he wasn't playing, right? He came back from that injury, from all that controversy, and he said, I'm fine, I'm 100%. I'm not playing because the coach sees me as the team's 4th striker. I accept that and I play the minutes they give me. He took a little jab. On the same day at the press conference, Arbeloa responded, right, visibly surprised and all, and he started by saying, I would like to have 4 strikers, but I don't. I didn't say that to him, right? He probably misunderstood me. Real Madrid faced many management issues last season. Whether Xabi Alonso's work started or ended because of that, the following chapters, which I just illustrated, also give the management a reason to bring in a slightly tougher coach. A coach who can manage these crises, these problems, and the huge egos of such a big club a little better. The biggest club in the world, which is full of stars, as always, right? As usual. Players, It's a real all-star squad with players from all over the world, and they've strengthened a lot for this season. One of the main aspects that Real Madrid focused on in this transfer window was the defensive system. For the right-back position, Dumfries has arrived. Former Inter player known for offering strong attacking support, is basically a wing-back, right? He's a very different player from Trent Alexander-Arnold, whom Real Madrid and Mourinho will try to get back to his best over the course of this season in Europe. And with all of Real Madrid's centre-back issues, right? The inconsistency of Asensio, the injuries to Militao, and also the issues with Risen, who was signed last season but hasn't settled in, led Real Madrid to bring in Konate, the French centre-back who was a starter in the 2022 World Cup and came from Liverpool. He's also a very good player, a solid and fast centre-back. I imagine he'll form a centre-back partnership with Rudiger. We'll get into the team and look at each Real Madrid player in detail in a moment. On the left side, Real also went to the market and brought in Cucurella, a full-back who stood out a lot for Chelsea in recent seasons and also in Spain's World Cup title. He was signed before the World Cup began. Real Madrid had no players selected by Spain for this World Cup, but Florentino Perez went and signed a player who had been called up before it started. So there was a Real Madrid player in the Spanish squad. Spain ended up becoming world champions. Cucurella at full-back, very well-rounded, right? He defends well, has strength supporting and moving forward, and can help build up play. He's a strong addition to Real Madrid's defense. For the midfield, Real Madrid made an addition that seems to me more like a squad depth move, which is Bernardo Silva, a player who ended his contract with Manchester City. He was without a club and is now coming to Real Madrid. I don't see Bernardo starting for Real Madrid. They've got Bellingham, Valverde, Tchouaméni, Camavinga, and Arda Güler had a good season too. Still, Real Madrid is very interesting. And finally, up front in the attack, Real Madrid had two reinforcements, one signing and a player returning from loan. And for me, that also counts as an addition, Wendry. After a good second half of the season at Lyon, he returns. The signing was Jan Diomande, one of the big standouts of the Bundesliga last season. Leipzig player, a dribbler, a player with individual moves, very incisive out wide, very sharp. He had a great World Cup for the Ivory Coast national team, and he arrives to strengthen this Real Madrid for the rest of the season. Another new thing at Real Madrid for the start of this season is the contract renewal of Vinicius Jr. He was flirting with Arsenal. No, Arsenal really wanted to sign Vini. Real Madrid managed to secure a contract extension with him for another 6 seasons until 2032. And Vini will obviously have a fundamental role in Jose Mourinho's team, as the very decisive player he has been for Real in recent seasons. Most likely in an attacking duo with Kylian Mbappe. Kylian Mbappe scored 42 goals last season, controversies off the field. Behavioral issues that are invariably pointed out regarding the Frenchman. But his performance on the field is hard to question, right? A player scored 43 goals in his first Real Madrid season and 42 in his second. It's true Real Madrid hasn't won major titles since he joined except for a Super Cup. They haven't secured any significant titles. I don't think that's Mbappe's fault or responsibility. He's scoring goals, and I believe their partnership will be crucial again this season. Let's look at the lineup then. Well, my friends, I started here with the 3 players who are key starters in this Real Madrid. Some others are as well, but this is the main backbone. I want to start the team from here. Courtois in goal, the best goalkeeper in the world in my opinion. And the duo I mentioned earlier, Vinicius and Mbappe. It's important to discuss them as a duo since Vini has played as a winger and Mbappe has played on both the right and left. But for a long time now, Vini has been this player who plays closer to the goal. And at times, he's still the player closest to the box for the Brazilian national team. In the last World Cup, we saw his ability to make a difference playing near the box, near the goal, scoring important goals. And it's the same thing with Mbappe, right? At the last World Cup, he was already France's centre forward, right? Number 9 with great mobility and movement. I think these two players tend to complement each other a lot and very well in this formation, playing close together, as has invariably happened this season. Putting Vini back on the wing. I think with Mbappe, you're taking away, cutting off their best qualities. Demanding defensive work that I think they can even deliver, but I don't know if they really want to, and I don't know if that's the best option for Real Madrid in that sense. At right back, Dumfries is an option for Mourinho's Real Madrid this season. A fullback, as I said, with a great ability to support, to get forward, right? A player with a lot of physicality, but also with a lot of technical quality, right? He has performed over the past few years, both at Inter and at times with the Dutch national team, much more as a wing-back, a player operating from midfield forward, rather than specifically as a right-back. Which raises a question about whether he'll be in Jose Mourinho's starting lineup, because in this equation there's Alexander-Arnold, who last season couldn't manage to have a consistent run of performances. And he's a fullback with a very different style from Dumfries, right? While Dumfries is a wingback. The guy who's going to cover this entire right flank here. Trent Alexander-Arnold has in recent years become a fullback who also plays as a midfielder, right? And at times with the England national team, he even played as a midfielder. He was left out in the last World Cup. But he's a fullback who can obviously start here in the back four, but move inside and play as an extra man in midfield. Help organize the attacking plays. And I imagine that Trent Alexander-Arnold will be in the starting lineup because there's an issue there in the offensive system. I'll soon mention another new Real Madrid player who can fill that position and help stretch the field while the other attacks more through the middle. It might fit better with Real Madrid's characteristics for this season. In defense, Rudiger, I imagine he'll be a starter here on the left side of the defensive system, as he has been in recent years, almost always. And Konate, who was signed. I think he'll be your centre-back partner, your partner in this Real Madrid defensive system. There's Militao, but we need to see how he'll come back from this new injury he unfortunately had. And what condition he'll be in after that, right? He's a player who, in recent years, has dealt with a lot of physical problems, and that's kept Militao from performing at his best on the field. So Rudiger, Konate, and Trent Alexander-Arnold. On the left back, there won't be much debate. Cucurella naturally takes that position, a player signed for that spot at Real Madrid. World champion. He had good spells with the Spanish national team, right? Not just the World Cup, but he also won the Euro, and he did well at Chelsea too. He stood out at times. So I imagine that the defensive line for Real Madrid to start the season will be the one you see on the screen. And just like we're putting together this Real Madrid team for this season with several stars and great players, you can build your own team too. Have you heard of Futebol Maximo Fantasy? Not yet? Then click the link below in the description. You'll go to the website and check out our fantasy game. You can build your team in the Brazilian Championship, in La Liga, in the Premier League, maybe even in the Brazilian Serie B and several other important leagues around the world. So it's already live, it's easy and simple to use. Just click the link below, you'll go there and get to know our fantasy. In this Real Madrid midfield, which is not the fantasy one, there's a trio that I don't think will be changed. Jude Bellingham, Valverde and Tchouaméni. Tchouaméni will be the holding midfielder with Bellingham on his left and Valverde on his right. That's the trio. That's because I believe Jose Mourinho will fit Diomande in here on the right side, at least at the start of this season. As a sharp player, fast, good at dribbling one-on-one. It's true he used to play on the left at Leipzig and for the national team, but I imagine he can adapt. And that's also why, as I mentioned earlier, Arnold could become an extra midfielder with Diomande really stretching the field wide. On the other side, with Cucurella, he can be an overlapping player in moments when Real Madrid is pushing forward. Bellingham making runs, Valverde himself also getting forward as he's a player who joins the attack very well and finishes. So Real Madrid might build up play usually in this way here, or even with Tchouaméni between the center backs, right, to start the play, and then Trent with Bellingham or Trent with Valverde. Anyway, there are plenty of options in this offensive setup for Real Madrid, in my opinion. But honestly, I think Mourinho will start with this 4-3 for the start of the season, right, with a 4-3, kind of lopsided, you know, because Diomande will play as a winger, and on the other side, Vinicius will be more of a second striker than an actual winger, and then when it comes to tracking back, Bellingham can cover this side, Valverde and Tchouaméni, the buddies, right, forming a midfield duo, and Diomande dropping back on the flank. So that Real Madrid can defend in a 4-2 without the ball, no problem at all. And in that sense, another option would be bringing in Bernardo. And then there would be some changes here. Look, I'm going to take Diomande out of the lineup. Bernardo could come into that midfield trio. Valverde would play on the right side like he has many times over the past few seasons, keeping that same dynamic. Vinicius and Mbappe here on the left and Valverde more out wide, something that looks more like a 4-2. With Bellingham and Valverde on the sides, Tchouaméni and Bernardo here as the midfield pair. Bernardo has already played countless times as the number 8 at Manchester City with Pep Guardiola. And then having Valverde coming a little more inside could open up space here. Look, to have Dumfries play at left back, a player who overlaps, who gets into attacking areas. And Valverde could be an extra midfielder, a guy to play inside, right? Maybe both fullbacks would be freer, or with Cucurella building up closer to Rudiger and Konate. And then Dumfries overlapping a lot, Vini at times stretching the field more and then cutting inside. These are dynamics that can be worked on in this Real Madrid. They've really strengthened their squad for this season, right? I think that's the main point for Real Madrid for this next football cycle, right? With João Diomande, with Bernardo, with Dumfries, with Cucurella, with Konate, with Trent Alexander-Arnold, Real Madrid's squad has gotten much stronger for this upcoming football season that's about to start. And then you can look at this whole lineup and think, but what about Hendrick? He's coming back to Real Madrid after a good season at Lyon with his value up and everything. I think Hendrik will have the same status as before when he was at Real Madrid. He'll still be a substitute. Maybe he'll get more minutes. We'll see him on the field more, coming off the bench more often, playing more consecutive matches, even if it's just 15, 20 or 30 minutes. But as a starter in this Real Madrid setup with Mbappe and Vinicius Jr., I think it's very, very unlikely that Hendrik would start. Even though he can play as a winger on the right side like he did at times at Lyon, I don't think Jose Mourinho sees him that way. We'll find out when the season starts. But for me, Hendrik will continue to be a squad player for Real Madrid, but with more minutes this season. And still on the topic of the transfer market, Real Madrid made a big attempt for Rodri, right? But according to reports from the Spanish press, Rodri prefers to play for Barcelona. It could be that by the time you're watching this video, this deal has already been settled. Rodri may have gone to Barcelona or not. He could also stay, of course, at Manchester City, who signed Elliot Anderson. Anyway, there are also interesting teams for this season's competition, right? But Rodri is also a player who would fit well as that first midfielder, but as a passer, right? That's something this Real Madrid team lacks since Toni Kroos left, right? I don't think Bernardo Silva can necessarily be that player. He can be a playmaker in midfield, the guy who puts his foot on the ball, lifts his head and dictates the play. That's not necessarily what Valverde is. That's also not exactly what Bellingham is. Tchouaméni is a strong defensive midfielder, good in build-up play, but he's not that maestro in front of the defense. So at various times, I think Bernardo can fill that role, but the big wish was to have Rodri for Real Madrid this season to fit perfectly into that midfield. But what about you? What do you think of this Real Madrid? Do you like this team for this season, the signings, the arrival of Mourinho? Share your opinion below. Leave your thoughts in the comments.